Hello and welcome to another edition of On the Hill Media. I'm Fosie Weston, and today our guest is Mr. Jason Papanikolas, District 21 candidate for delegate. Mr. Jason, how are you doing?
Good. Good to meet you.
Mr. Papanikolas, can you give us a little bit of information about yourself?
Well, I was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. My family moved out here for college. Met my wife. We got married up in Michigan, moved back down here, and I've lived here ever since. Moved to Laurel, Maryland about 5 years ago, and got to know our General Assembly candidates when I lost my job 2 years ago in 2008. Like so many others in the financial sector, the money just dried up, and I was the last man of a five-man operation, so I was out. And it has taken me, I was unable to find another job until 2009. It pays about a third of what I used to make. It's actually been very difficult to make ends meet, so I understand the folks in PG County who are looking at foreclosure crises and bankruptcy. I've gone there, I've done that, and I'm picking up the pieces just like everyone else. But what's really driven me to run for state delegate has been the reaction of the current delegation. They have voted for tax increases when I can't afford a tax increase. Neither can you, neither can anyone else in this state. They've driven jobs from this state at a time when there are some 200,000 Marylanders who need a job. Any job will do, but they've just driven jobs out. Mm-hmm. We've lost, I believe, 3,000 businesses and 20 or 30,000 people. And that we can't let that stand. So, I mean, what I'm looking to do is to restructure our budget so that we're solvent long term. We have to solve the pension crisis that exists, and we also have to solve the transportation dilemma. One of the ways that we've made the budget work for the last 10 years, for that matter, is to raid the transportation fund. So we've got all these transportation projects that we need to move people around this area so that they can stay in this area, stay in their jobs, and raise their children the way they want to raise them. Where's that money going to come from? I don't know. Do you? Nobody knows. So we need to address those issues immediately. Maryland's probably going to lose its AAA bond rating next year because of all the antics that we put up with for the last 10 years. I also want to, at the same time, address education. We know that we need to improve in certain areas of education. But one thing that I was shocked at in Prince George's County is that only about 60% of all that money that you and I pay in for our children's education actually makes it to the classroom. Now, my wife is a school teacher, and I've had 7 years experience with the inside of the PG County school system. And I can tell you, that money is wasted. A lot of it is wasted, and there's no good reason for that. Right now, we are building a brand new elementary school at a time when we are losing 7,500 students through attrition. That's $50 million that could go elsewhere. So what I'm proposing is that we actually set a statewide mandate that you must spend 90% of all that money in the classroom. Now, that sounds like a huge goal. Sounds almost unreachable. But nonprofits in this country do it every day. Most small businesses do it every day. If they can do it, why can't the government? And the third thing that I'm looking at is to create a better business environment. We have a lot of regulations in the state that don't necessarily make sense, that don't work for us, that have been driving out companies left and right. Mm-hmm. The recent Northrop Grumman moving to Virginia, that's the perfect example. We offered them twice as much in incentives as the state of Virginia did. Twice as much. And they still said, sorry, we'll go elsewhere. So that's what I'm about. That's what I want to do. That's what I think we all need to get behind and do for not even us, but for our children and our grandchildren. They're ultimately going to be left holding the bag.
We do know up in the next year, the next congressional, well, not next congressional year, but next legislation year here in the state of Maryland, we potentially have to make $1 billion in budget cuts. What do you think we need to do to make this successful?
Well, I do know in the last legislative session, the minority leadership actually identified about $800 million in redundant agencies that we could cut some money from. That's obviously not going to cover the entire $1 billion. And we do have a requirement in the state of Maryland to have a balanced budget. That's one of our better amendments, if you ask me. So where can we get some of the other money? Well, Maryland does have a Medicaid system that is, I wouldn't call it a Cadillac, I'd call it almost a Lamborghini of Medicaid systems. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a Lamborghini. A Cadillac might do. I think most people who are on Medicaid would be very happy with a Chevy too. We're going to have to go back and look at where we can maybe tweak the system a little bit to cut some of the costs there. The third place is, unfortunately, probably the Thornton funding. Now, Thornton, when it was originally proposed, made all these cost assumptions, said you need to pay this, 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 and this, and created a formula for it. We've not gone back and actually looked if the formula even makes sense. We've had, 5 years now of testing the Thornton formula? We should have enough data now that we can go back and see exactly where this money has been most cost effective and where maybe it has been wasted for whatever reason, and either reallocate that money or remove it. One of the problems that Thornton created is that they said we had to have this formula, but they never said where we got the money. Now, I am not opposed to a tax increase, but I think our taxes are already too high, and we really do need to prove to ourselves, if no one else, that we can live within the budget that we have set, live within the revenue. If at some point in the future we discover that we simply cannot do that, then we'll have to think of more creative ways to raise revenue. Because right now, 50% of every dollar that you and I make goes to taxes, either sales tax, property tax, or income tax. When you stop and think about it, the cost of housing in Maryland is between 30 and 40 cents of every dollar. So that leaves you with 10 cents to feed your family, to fill up your car with gas, to hopefully, maybe, go to a movie. There's just not enough money in people's paychecks to keep paying like this. So we do have to address cutting our spending first. I'm not going to say I won't raise taxes. I'm not going to say I'm going to cut them either. We need to prove we can live within what we have right now. And then we need to go back longer term, more than a couple years out, and think, do we really want the government doing what they're doing? Or can we find a better way to do it through either the private sector, some sort of nonprofit? I mean, nonprofits do some fabulous work. I've worked with Side by Side, which is a local educational nonprofit in Laurel. And what they've been doing is doing family academies, specifically for new immigrant families and the lower income families, whose number one question is always, how can I help my child succeed? How can I help him succeed? Well, the school system doesn't give you that answer. The school system says this is the curriculum. Side by Side goes in there, and at their family academies, they teach you these are some steps that you can take to help your child learn to read. Here's how you can teach him math. They even, since PG County uses a slightly unorthodox formulation for their math curriculum, they even teach the parents how the math curriculum works, so that you're not sitting there going, why are you learning fractions now when you don't even know how to divide?